Episode number 44, Making the Case. The truth about the human sex drive. Let's get it. Hey, welcome back to another episode of Making the Case. I am none other than your host, Dr. Jacob Isom, educator, author, speaker, entrepreneur, content creator, a little bit of everything. All right. We back at you again, man. The holidays are upon us, so I definitely had to get another episode in before everybody eating their turkey and dressing and all that good stuff, man. All right, I know your boy looking a little rough. I'm about to get cut up before the holiday. Don't worry about it, okay? Been, you know, shucking and jiving, getting stuff done. So, but I'm gonna get clean for you. I'm gonna get clean for you. All right. Hey, got another great episode for y'all, man. Once again, the truth about the human sex drive. But before I get into my opening statement, of course, we got to go over our two-channel norms. One, we attack points and not people, and then two, we don't do all the cussing, derogatory stuff because we keep it professional over here. Okay, we are an educational channel. All right. So we just like to entertain you as well. All right. But so the human sex drive, right? Let's get into my opening statement. Um, there it has always been probably for the last definitely in the last couple of decades, probably even going back before that. There's always been conversation between men and women, particularly when it comes to men about their sex drive, right? About sex, okay? We know that for the most part, um, women in sex has been kind of taboo, to be honest with you, because of what we kind of the expectation of women in sex are different when it comes to men. All right, so men are known to be um, out there, right, so to speak, to sow their royal oats. Be fruitful and multiply, right? We've heard these different phrases and terminology before. So, and some of that definitely, and I wouldn't say some, really, most of it definitely come from a biblical sense. Now, one could say why that is the case, right? Because we know men wrote the Bible. But anywho, even if we're not taking it from a religious standpoint, we can go at it from a scientific lens, which is what we're going to do with this episode. Okay. I'm always about the science and the history. So that's a lot of time we're going to be breaking things down from a scientific and historical standpoint. Okay. We definitely talk about, the religious aspect when it fits, but for this episode, when we're talking about the human sex drive, of course, we're talking about it from a biological standpoint, in particular, an evolutionary biological standpoint. So that is definitely what we're going to address. So we're going to address, well, what does the sex drive look for the man and the woman, right? Because we know it's different. We're going to touch on the different sex hormones. Some you may heard of, some you may not, and we're also going to talk about, well, when it comes to the brain, right? So we're going to talk about some brain stuff. All right. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get into my first piece of evidence. And I will say, with this topic or this episode, much like I think I mentioned in the last episode, uh, I'm not really making a case per se. Well, the case that is really being made is the fact that, well, sex is natural, right? That's really the case that I'm trying to make, and we shouldn't be ashamed of it with a man and woman. But now, when it comes to social aspects, right, we still have to be disciplined, right? We still have to understand that the number one reason why we have sex at the very top is procreation, all right? And then everything else fall down. But we typically like to focus on the recreational aspects of sex. But no, we have sex because we evolved, to have this sex drive in order to procreate and have kids to keep the species going. So we're going to touch on that as well. So without further ado, let's get into my first piece of evidence.
Hard coded into our brains and bodies is the desire for sex. It's evolutionary. All living things are driven to reproduce in a way that's beyond our conscious control. So, no matter your sexual orientation or your actual interest in having children, your brain wants you to have sex. This is Your Brain On, where we explore how the world affects our brains and ourselves. When you see the object of your desire, the hypothalamus fuels your lust, stimulating the production of sex hormones testosterone and estrogen from the testes or ovaries. That's why some women report higher levels of sexual motivation around the time of ovulation, when estrogen levels are highest. As sexual activity begins and your arousal increases, your brain deactivates regions such as the prefrontal cortex, which regulates important functions like rational behavior and self-awareness. So you may feel like you're losing sense of yourself or your self-control. Meanwhile, activity in areas like your cerebellum ramps up rapidly. The cerebellum helps process emotion, making you feel connected to your partner, but it also increases muscle tension throughout your body, setting the stage for orgasm. And in the moment of climax, 30 different regions of your brain go wild. Areas like the hypothalamus and nucleus accumbens are highly active. That's why orgasm affects not only the genitals, but also speeds up respiratory and circulatory systems and tightens parts of the body, including the stomach and thighs. And your brain's reward center receives literally thousands of pleasure signals from your fully engaged nervous system. Other brain regions, like your lateral orbital frontal cortex, shut off, creating the out-of-body sensation you may feel during orgasm. This crescendo of activity lasts about 10 to 20 seconds, and then it calms quickly. The pituitary gland sends out prolactin, which creates that post-sex afterglow and a drowsy, lazy feeling. Meanwhile, within about 1 minute of orgasm, the hypothalamus also releases oxytocin, known as the bonding hormone. It's joined by other mood boosters. These can flow for up to 5 minutes, and that's why sex feels so good to your brain, even long after the big moment.
All right, so that was my first piece of evidence of the truth about the human sex drive. And normally I don't start off with a video to kick things off, but I thought that video was so powerful, even though how short it is, of talking about, well, really why we want sex. Like, we're literally hardwired to have sex. When I was doing research for this video, like, I was learning some things that I did not know. Some stuff I did know, some stuff I didn't. I didn't know all the different areas of the brain that is involved in sex, right? So of course, all these things is happening simultaneously and happening very quickly and rapidly. And we're just feeling the sensations. It's the reason why our body tense up, as the video was saying. It's the reason why we feel different, particularly men. And fellas know exactly what I'm talking about. We feel different right after sex. Okay. So the brain has a huge responsibility and a part in what drives us to want to have sex, right? So it's literally biological. It's literally wired in us. So I don't understand why we typically shame people for wanting to have sex. Now, do some of us have a very high sex drive versus a low sex drive? Absolutely. And we're going to touch on that in one of our pieces of evidence. But sex is definitely very natural to every single human being. And the video touched on not just human beings, any mammal or anything that is responsible for duplicating itself. All right. So I just wanted to show you that real quick, and we're gonna get into our second piece of evidence. It's only gonna get better from here. Let's go. All right. So for our second piece of evidence, when we're talking about the truth of the human sex drive, we're gonna talk about the libido. Now, many of you have heard of the libido, which is primarily responsible for our sex drive in both men and women. But there's some other things that we're going to address in this article that you might not know about the libido. Okay. And so this is from a platform called Natural Cycles. Funny name for a platform, right? And the article is just called "What is Libido?" All right, so we're gonna break that down, and as well as talk about some other things as it relates to libido. Let's see. Another word for sex drive, the term libido describes a person's desire for sexual activity. There is no numeric measurement for libido, but it's usually referred to as being low or high. There are many things that can affect our desire for sex, from biological reasons to social or psychological factors. In this post, we're going to look at hormones, how they impact sexual desire, how libido changes throughout the cycle, plus the signs and causes of a low libido. Okay. So if someone says that they doesn't have a high sex drive or they don't want sex a lot, it may be because they have a low libido. All right. Sex hormones. The main sex hormone are estrogen, uh, progesterone, progesterone, and testosterone. While we associate progesterone and estrogen with the menstrual cycle and testosterone with sperm production, all three of these hormones are present to some extent in the human body, which means both male and female. What is a normal libido? Sex drive is usually described as being low or high, but what's normal when it comes to libido? It's important to note that sex drive can vary hugely from person to person. The only normal when it comes to sex drive is what's normal for you. Some people like sexual activity, including masturbation, every day, others once a week or once a month, while others don't feel like having sex or engaging in sexual activity at all. I would like to hear from those people. It's also important to understand that your own libido can fluctuate. It's not set in stone. You may go through periods when you have a higher sex drive and at times when you have less desire for sex. That's totally normal. And there could be many different reasons for this, from stress and fatigue to menopause and relationship problems. All right. So many different factors that can affect your sex drive. We're going to go past that. Causes of overly high libido and extremely high libido can be caused by various factors such as hypersexuality, sometimes described as sex addiction, and imbalance of neurotransmitters, the chemicals in your brain, some medication, certain recreational drugs, and some medical conditions. Wow, that's interesting. Causes of a low libido, medication used to treat anxiety, depression, aging, low self-esteem, increased stress, anxiety, sexual problem like erectile dysfunction, vaginal dryness, mental health issues, relationship problem, hormonal birth control, pregnancy, childbirth, hormonal changes both men and women, menopause, or perimenopause, which I believe perimenopause is like when it happened at a younger age than it's supposed to. I believe recreational drug use, smoking, and alcohol. You see, that list was way longer. Let's see. Female libido. What is libido in women? It's the same as for anyone else. It's your desire for sexual activity, and it's important to note that there is no normal when it comes to libido levels. Everyone is different, and our body behave in different ways. And our sex drive is no exception. A number of things can cause an increase or decrease sex drive. Female libido can change throughout the months, as there are points in the cycle when libido levels are typically considered to be higher. Usually in the days approaching ovulation, when we're most fertile, our desire for sex is also at its highest. When a dip in estrogen and increased level of progesterone, I be butchering that. Towards the end of the cycle can cause a slump in desire, which makes sense though. When you're ovulating and you're increasing your sexual desire, that makes sense. As well as it affects the estrogen and what you're at in your menstrual cycle, there are also a whole host of other things that can affect female sex drive, including general lifestyle factors, stress, anxiety, depression, chronic health conditions, hormonal changes during pregnancy, caring for a baby, post-birth trauma, hormonal changes during menopause and perimenopause, vaginal dryness, relationship issues, painful sex, um, vaginismus, and involuntary clamping of the vaginal muscles, which makes penetration difficult, infection like a yeast infection, problem reaching orgasm. Man. Women on hormonal birth control are unlikely to experience the same hormonal fluctuation in libido as synthetic hormones and birth control work to prevent ovulations. So, birth control can affect a woman's sex drive. Interesting. Male libido. While female libido levels tend to fluctuate over the course of our cycles, male libido tends to fluctuate over a shorter period of time, with testosterone levels rising and falling throughout the day. Libido levels are often highest for males in the morning when testosterone levels are greatest. This is why men often wake with a. That's why. Man, I never knew that. Yeah, that's good to know. A physical sign of libido being high, this typically decreases throughout the day and is lowest late at night. Speak for yourself. Okay, my bad. As well as fluctuating in the 24-hour period, levels of testosterone also typically decrease throughout a man's lifetime. These are usually at the highest level during teenage years and start to decline after this point. Mirroring this dip in testosterone, libido also tends to decline as men get older. As well as affecting male libido, this hormone also helps regulate sperm production, development of the sex organ, hair growth, muscle development, and bone mass when the voice breaks in puberty, the production of red blood cells. Oh, let's see. Can health issues affect the libido? Many different health issues can cause a lower libido. This can be underactive thyroid, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, depression, anemia, kidney failure, hyperlactonemia, a condition that causes high levels of prolactin in your blood. Um, man, that's interesting. All right, yeah, that's all I want to read, but um this was a very interesting article and read about there not really being a normal level of libido is really based on you, which that should make you feel good, right? So you shouldn't be comparing your sex drive to somebody else because it's just different in every person. And what can possibly cause a low and a high sex drive. So I thought this was very. All right. So for my final piece of evidence, we're going back to some scientific data for you to talk about the human sex drive. What other way can really make my case other than to go to biology and science, right? I didn't know another way. So I have another article for you. I forget, to be honest with you, what journal I got this from because I literally downloaded this as a PDF. But if you would like to know the journal, you can always hit me up. But um, so the title of this article is by a gentleman by the name of Malcolm Potts: Sex and the Birth Rate, Human Biology, Demographic Change, and the Access to Fertility Regulation Methods. So sorry. Uh, I forget to turn off my ringer sometimes. I apologize. So once again, this article is 40 pages, and I'm not going to read all 40 pages to you, but there are bits and pieces of the article that I do want to read to you that I thought was very interesting that you may find interesting as well. All right. So let's get into it. Go down to the parts. Oh, no, hold on. Yeah. Let me. Biological evolution is driven by differential levels of reproductive success among competing individuals of the same species. Animals whose combination of genes fit them more successfully to their environment than others will, on average, leave more progeny to reproduce in the next generation. Since Darwin's Origin of Species, and more particularly the descent of man and selection in relation to sex, scientists have accepted that human beings evolved from other primates. Indeed, much of modern scientific medicine is based on observation of other mammals made within the evolutionary framework. Among mammals that live in social groups, males with high rank and power often impregnate more sexual partners and have an above average number of offspring. Now, did you hear that? Now, even though I would say in today's society, we're kind of seeing the opposite. We're seeing the males who are not as powerful and dominant have most of the kids. I think your high value or your rich men are not having as many babies as they used to. So, which of course, I can definitely pull the numbers because I know the numbers support that. All right. Females with the highest social status gain access to more resources and also achieve greater reproductive success. That is very true. In pre-literate and pre-industrial societies, successful men and women, as measured by wealth or social status, also on average have more children. But in the contemporary world, economic status is commonly inversely related to family size. Existing theories on the demographic transition confront but do not satisfactorily explain this important yet exceedingly puzzling fact. Human beings have been able to exercise conscious controls over their fertility since the second half of the 20th century. But wherever access to birth control technology is not constrained by law, policy, custom, or economic factors, there has been a marked fall in family size, in most cases to a total fertility rate or two or less. Uh, Social success in a modern world tends to be associated with the acquisition of material goods, but not with larger families. It follows that making fertility regulation choices available through multiple convenient channels of distribution is likely to prove the most straightforward strategy for lowering birth rates. Uh, Evolution in the drive for sex. Charles Darwin acknowledged his debt to Robert Malthus, but the converse of integrating Darwin's evolutionary principle into demographic theory has taken place slowly. The problem is two-way. Not only have evolutionary insights been overlooked by social scientists and demographers, but social biologists have given insufficient attention to the changing patterns of human fertility. Vining called the fact that the actual possession of status and power seems on average to deter rather than to stimulate reproductive efforts among modern humans, a central theoretical problem of human social biology. I definitely agree with that. The fact that I think as people gain more resources and wealth and status in modern times, people are really looking to just enjoy that. And it's not that they're not trying to share it, is this that they're not trying to get in a situation where it can be taken from them, where they can give that power up, particularly men, right? So it's not that they don't want to have children, and they're still having children, but it's still very limited, right? Because they want to be able to enjoy the fruits of their labor, right? So I definitely agree with that point. Individuals are mere vehicles carrying in Darwin's powerful phrase, selfish gene. If, as evolutionary biology asserts, reproductive achievement is the measure by which evolution judges the individual, then it is reasonable to look for evolved reproductive behaviors common to all societies. Contemporary biology analysis of human behavior avoids the dichotomy between nature and nurture that has plagued thinking in this field since Francis Galton. Primates in particular have evolved a nervous system that allowed them to change their behavior to suit their environment. It is unfortunate, therefore, the biological and cultural forms of determinism have been sometimes portrayed as alternative, the acceptance of one being automatically assumed to exclude the other. We are par excellence an animal that evolved to learn, and learning means changing our behavior to fit the world around us. Absolutely, right? We're supposed to learn every single day, every single moment, positive or negative. Nature and nurture interact continuously in wonderfully complex ways. Inherited temperaments in different environments can express all sorts of different behaviors. The study of family size certainly shows this to be true. At the same time, certain aspects of our behavior, as well as our anatomy, are shaped by genetic factors, and human behavior is not infinitely plastic, but it is limited by certain universal inherited traits. Sexual jealousy, for example, appears to be found across all cultures. Absolutely. Let's see. Evolution depends on the slow spreading inherited mutation that enable individuals and therefore also their offspring to survive and compete more effectively in their environment. Some animals, such as polar bear, appear to have evolved rapidly, but a mere 8,000, 10,000 years of settled agriculture or 6,000 years of urban living did not seem to have been long enough for any large-scale evolutionary adaptation to have occurred on our species. Over 90% of the 1 to 200,000 years of human existence was spent in hunter-gathering societies, and evolution must have tailored human behavior to produce a range of family sizes that approach the optimum to fit that environment. That 90%, I want you to think about that. Over 90% of our human existence was hunter-gatherer societies. So we're looking at a very small speck of our human existence that is what we have now, modern times, right? That's just to put it in context, right? So we had more babies back then, which means we probably had more sex back then because we had more times on our hand, right? Nowadays we have less time, but more resources and more money. but we got more stress, more anxiety, etc. All right. That might be all I want to read to you. Yeah, because once, like I said, this is a very long article, and I just want to touch on that. The naturalness, when it comes to the human sex drive, we have literally evolved in order to reproduce. We used to reproduce very rapidly back in the days, but um, now it's a lot of different factors to why a lot of people have two kids or less now. And I won't go into all those factors, but I'm pretty sure you can guess what those factors are. Okay. So let's go ahead and get into my closing statement. All right. So that wraps up another episode for the Making a Case show. The truth about the human sex drive. And the truth is that sex is natural. Sex is hardwired in our brain. Sex was a evolutionary thing that, of course, procreation is the main reason why we want sex the way we want sex. We also talked about how we can have a low or a high libido, and that can include several different factors: stress, anxiety, medication, drugs, etc. Right? The list goes on and on. So that is the truth about our sex drive, and we should not be shaming men because they want sex. Right? We should not be shaming women because they want sex. Right? But still, socially, we have to be responsible. Nothing is changing when it comes to the double standard between men and women as it relates to sex, right? Men want a woman with a low body count, and a man's body count is not as important. I'm not saying it's not important, but it's just not as important. Okay, so those truths still remain. Nothing changed with the evidence that I presented for you today. So, um, I hope you learned a lot, because I learned a lot. All right. From today's episode, man. Once again, I appreciate your support and your love. I'll leave the links for my books. If you would like a consultation, whether that's one-on-one, couple, you need me to speak, anything, rcdconsultancy.com. The link will be in the description. My merch, my books, all that good stuff, Cash App, social media handles, all will be in the links. All right. As always, I'm you, you are me, love, always love eternal. Remember, the worst thing you could do is lie to yourself, right? And I believe we made that case, baby. All right. Deuces. Well, love.